Danielle Smith, she thinks that we're going to get a deal before the G7. That follows up on what we said that yesterday, that it looks like there might be a deal before the G7. Alberta Premier says that there's been a breakthrough in discussions with the Americans regarding Trump's ambition to achieve energy dominance. Smith thinks that there some kind of détente or interim agreement could be sealed before the G7 begins in 10 days.
Well, my only concern really is that Danielle Smith she's acting rationally and she's thinking rationally, whereas the Trump administration, I don't think they're certainly not behaving rationally. Whether or not they're thinking rationally will be revealed in the long term, but they're not acting in a rational way, because what she says is there is no possible way for the Americans to build up their aluminium and steel production or oil production or any of this. There's no way for them to do that without Canada. And therefore, she thinks they're going to have to be sensible about it. But I don't know. I'm yet to see rationality from the Trump administration. So, but, she is there. She's in Washington. She's speaking to these people. So obviously, she knows a lot more of the details than we could ever know. So, and she's optimistic. So therefore, we should be optimistic.
Yeah, she is one of the more rational ones that have on both sides of the border.
Yeah, she doesn't really indulge in fantastical, stupid thinking that much, does she? I mean, she's certainly been accused of overestimating the price of oil in the future and things like that. And she's very bullish on Alberta oil. That's probably the only space in which she can be irrational. But other than that, she is basically like a businesswoman or something, isn't she? She's much more like concerned about material reality.
She hasn't talked about tanks rolling in the streets and stuff like that. She hasn't been quite as dramatic as some of the other politicians in Canada. If you're listening, Christine Freeland, that refers to you.
She's listening.
And then Canada posts the largest merchandise trade deficit on record in April, $17.1 billion.
Not good, is it?
No.
It's, I mean, obviously, this is with inflation. We might have had a larger one in history in terms of as a percentage of our overall national wealth or something like that. But yeah, that is crazy, because there was also one in March. There was also I think it was about 2 billion in March. So, and this is caused by the tariffs, basically, almost entirely, because exports are down. Exports are down massively, really. And when that happens, if you're still importing just about the same amount, which we're importing slightly less, but still just about the same amount of imports, but exporting less, then you're gonna have this trade imbalance.
And likely some of that's due to that, that GDP in that first quarter being like 0.5, because a lot of people were front loading by taking lots of inventory, and that really started to show up here in April, right? So, because motor vehicle parts down 17% for April, so yeah.
It's not good, yeah. And even energy down, what was it, 7.9% down energy.
Yeah, and that was Melanie Jolie and Francois-Philippe Champagne saying they took the annualized rate of that 0.5 and turned it into 2.2 when that's not the rate. They didn't clarify that. They weren't very clear on that. Misleading at best. The Carney Liberals survived their first confidence test here with the throne speech, and it was kind of like a non-event. There was not a recorded vote.
Yeah, it all... the House of Commons had the camera on at that point, so you can watch what happens. But it's a strange one, because Andrew Scheer, you can actually see on the main camera on the floor, pointed at the floor. You can see Andrew Scheer just like having a giggle with someone, and the speaker says like, any objections? Andrew Scheer's just like giggling away. So obviously, what's happened there is they've all said there's no way that we can have an election now. The Tories don't want an election. And the Bloc and all the rest of them, they don't want one. So they've just let this happen. But rather than draw attention to themselves by having like a proper vote, they've just decided to sort of put their heads down and let it pass like this.
Yeah, so it actually passed on division, meaning the motion or bill in the House of Commons adopted without a formal recorded vote, but with some opposition noted. So yeah, so that first test, and then this posturing by the interim leader of the NDP. We're going to play that little clip here. It was all for naught. Oops, well, maybe we're not. I think your head won there. Nope. There you go. No. We're looking for it. There you go.
We will be voting no against the throne speech and making sure that the interests of working people across this country are reflected, and we'll continue to fight for those measures that we know that so many millions of Canadians and working families need in this country.
There you go. All that posturing for nothing.
That suggests to me that maybe all this happened over his head, and that Carney or Carney's whips just spoke to Pierre Poilievre and Yves-François Blanchet and had a little bit of a chinwag with them and said, are you gonna do anything about this? And they both said, nah. And then this guy maybe was just forgotten about. Unless he knew this was going to happen, but he thought, okay, this is an opportunity for us to try and get some attention because we're not an official party anymore. So it's not like we can stand up in the Commons and berate Mark Carney. We can't do that anymore. Like the opportunities to be heard are few and far between for the NDP. So maybe they just thought quite cynically, like, let's just make a big announcement about how we're not going to, like, because they're trying to differentiate themselves from the Singh era, where Singh would always be suspected to support the Liberals. And maybe they're trying to say, like, look, this is a different NDP now, even though there was no point in telling everybody that, because it's not like anything happened.
And I think you're right. What you said yesterday is that the NDP would look for an election, probably the only ones, because they actually are, they don't have official party status. And I think they'd like to have a mulligan and a redo on the election, if anything, because they're in the worst possible position right now.
Yeah, but they're also, the other thing is elections are very expensive and they don't have any money. They didn't have any money for the last one. Mm-hmm. So an election might sound theoretically good to them, but without money, it's a frightening prospect. And I think that's probably true for all of them, the money question. They're probably all like, they've emptied their bank accounts a bit, haven't they? I'm sure the Tories will still have some money left over. But by and large, yeah, I don't think they want to do it. And with Pierre not being an MP now, and the Tories need a bit of time. So I think realistically, it's going to be a while, isn't it? And you would think, give it maybe like 6 months or something like that. But 6 months from now is Christmas, and nobody wants an election at Christmas. So probably give it another 6 months. Give it a year maybe, and then it might be under consideration.
Well, according to the Angus Reid poll, Carney not as popular at this stage in the game as Trudeau, Harper, and Chrétien, and a little more popular than Martin, though. But again, this is a poll that really means nothing at this point in time. I'm pretty sure you've said many times that Carney's shine may come off rather quickly.
Yeah, well, in that sense, it might be worth considering it to be important, because, I mean, if you look at the Trudeau one there, Trudeau started from a higher point and fell obviously quite dramatically later on. But Carney is starting from this fairly low point here, and it's inevitable that with time his charms are going to wear off. And he's trying, isn't he? He's trying desperately to delay having to actually make a real decision, which is partly linked to his popularity, I think. Because as soon as you make a decision as a leader, you divide the population, don't you? Because there'll be some people that want it and some people that don't want it. So as soon as he makes a decision, then I think we'll see this start to fall even more. And then when people start to get used to him as well, when people start to get used to his waffling and his refusal to ever answer straight, that's really annoying. And I can remember in England, I remember Tony Blair, like that was one of the things that kind of sank him in the end, is that he just could not answer a question, couldn't do it. It had to be waffle. And it was, once things start to heat up, that becomes intolerable for the public, I think. But I would say, having said all that, it's not necessarily an inevitable downward trajectory, is it? Because if you look on the left there, you've got Trudeau, the daddy, who started out really badly there. Started out with 39% approval, but obviously ended up being one of one of the most significant political figures in Canadian history. So he obviously had something up his sleeve there, didn't he, to extend his political life?
Well, look, the Sun didn't do as well. The Sun started higher and finished a lot lower. Yeah.
Still amazes me though with Trudeau. It really fascinates me and amazes me that that he wasn't booted out in 2019.
Yeah.
And it's astonishing to me that he kept on going, because I mean, he was extraordinarily unpopular in 2019 among the people. He was really not a popular prime minister, but somehow hung on, which I guess is an indication that, you know, you can actually be really unpopular and still survive. And maybe that'll happen with Carney. I don't know.
One thing for sure with Carney, he's way more intelligent and you know, he's competent. It's just that he won't answer questions, and I think that's what's going to grate on some people, right? Just the arrogance sometimes.
Yeah, it's that superciliousness. It's that idea that you're having a conversation with a cardinal in the 17th century or something. It's like people of all places as well, in like Canada and the New World, don't think people like to be spoken to like that and divided into like aristocrat and peasant. And it feels a lot like that with Carney. It feels like he is just he's like the prince, isn't he? And I think that's gonna grate on people in time. And obviously so is Trudeau, we should say. That was something even from the early days that people didn't like about Trudeau, is that he was basically an aristocrat. And that carried on all the way till the end, until it eventually, you know, played a role in sinking him.
The debt forecast too, debt cost forecast at $70 billion, and that's going to be a problem for the government as well, as its interest cost will hit $70 billion by 2029. The budget office warned yesterday, and this is the Holly Dome Blacklock story, and that compares to a pre-pandemic debt servicing charge of $24 billion. I mean, that's triple almost. Of the public debt charges have increased significantly over the last 30 years due to substantial increase in the stock of public debt. And then we saw that. They blew the budget. We talked about it yesterday. They blew the budget by what? Over 50%. And the budget office said that debt charges will reach $70 billion. Yeah, that's a lot. And then
more than the federal health spending.
The Parliament has not balanced the budget since 2007. You know,
when a certain someone was in charge.
Yeah, the government of Canada is pushing up against a $1.8 trillion. There you go. It's just 1.8.
This is what Elon Musk is complaining about in America, though. He's saying that the debt servicing costs, like interest payments and paying down the loan, that will ultimately come to swallow up more and more and more of the US budget, to the point where they can no longer pay for like Medicaid and all the other things that are like sealed off in the US budget, and the military, obviously. And obviously that's high profile in the US, and they have an extraordinary amount of debt. But the same story is going on here to a lesser extent, but it's still happening here. Like that kind of expenditure, $70 billion, you know, that drowns out
debt. Yeah, just on the
a
debt.
lot of potential. Yeah, just purely on the debt. I mean, if you were in a household, you wouldn't want that, would you? You wouldn't want your mortgage and your car payment or whatever it is to be drowning out things like, I don't know, get drugs or whatever it is you need for your health, or food or something like that. You wouldn't want it to swallow that up and affect that side of your life, would you? But that's what the government is doing, unfortunately.
Yeah, so almost $2 trillion in debt, and trillion. Remember, people never use those words. Trillion, billion was a big deal. Right now, billion has seemed such a small number. Have you seen the image of a difference between a million, a billion, and a trillion in dollar bills?
It's quite profound, isn't it? And the other ways to look at it, like, I can't remember, but one of them is something like if you had $10,000 for every single day since 1 AD or something, and now Elon Musk would still have more money than you or something like that. I can't remember exactly how you do it, but that's just billion, obviously. So trillion is just like another order entirely.
Yeah, I was going to put it up there, but you can go search the internet and just do 1 million, 1 billion, and 1 trillion. You'll see the difference. And we've got this. I used to read this magazine in the past. This is Alfred E. Newman. Did you read Mad Magazine when you were a youngster?
I didn't read it, but I'm very familiar with this this chap's face.
Oh, what, me worry? Why would you, right? And then this all comes down to, and this is from Richard Diaz, that decarbonized oil is yet another meaningless Ottawa drivel whose sole purpose is to lie to Canadians about the nature of the economy. And then you and I talked about this chart yesterday. I don't know, can you put that full screen so we could see that bigger? Is that possible, or? No. We don't have the technology for that.
It is completely meaningless, because all it means is trying to reduce carbon somehow as much as you export. It's so silly and deluded. But we spoke about this a lot, didn't we? Yesterday.
So yeah, just it's actually silly. And then Polly, I've had a tweet out there that Carney said there would only be a pipeline if there's consensus, and the Premier says no. And there's not even consensus in the Liberal Canada, because we've heard Guilbeault say that as well. So despite these grand statements, press conferences, meetings, Liberals have no plan to build one, leaving us wholly reliant on the Americans. And you and I talk about, we'll talk about it later too, is like, like Western Canadian Select sells at a discount. Why? The answer is quite simple, isn't it?
It's certainly bad strategizing, bad planning would be the quickest way to say it, I think.
And the Bank of Canada stood pat yesterday, not dropping rates, even though in the face of high unemployment, and it looks like it could get worse. And then, David Rosenberg came out and said Tiff Macklin is looking like a deer caught in the headlights. And the less policymakers do now, the more they'll have to do later. And that, it goes on to say in both cases, the worst the economy was in the rearview mirror, not staring us in the face, as the case say. Most recently, just before COVID-19 hit, the Bank of Canada own common measure of inflation was again just about where it is currently, and the economy at that point was not considered to be on shaky ground, but the policy was pinned at 1.75. And so the less policymakers do now, the more they have to do later. Remember the historical record in recessions. The Bank of Canada ultimately brings the policy rate to a level that is 150 basis points below the prevailing common inflation trend. So calling for a move to a low end of neutral may end up being overly conservative. So yeah, I mean, there's so many indicators that say the rate has to go down. And especially, in the real estate sector, that's just basically not in good shape, as well as many, many mortgages are about to reset into much higher rates. And Canadians are, many Canadians are $200 away from meeting their monthly obligations. Speaking of the tariffs, we got a clip here to play from Mark Carney on the tariffs.
The latest tariffs on steel and aluminum are unjustified. They're illegal. They're bad for American workers, bad for American industry, and of course for Canadian industry as well. We have counter tariffs in a gross amount before remissions on over 90 billion of U.S. imports. We've acted strong. Those are in place. We will take some time, not much, some time, because we are in intensive discussions right now with the Americans on the trading relationship. Those discussions are progressing. I would note that the American action is a global action. It's not one targeted at Canada. So we will take some time, but not more, before we respond.
There you go. I'm going to play this one more clip here this is a CTV clip here. Let's play this here. Oh, we need a second here to get that clip there.
Time, all the while trying to negotiate an end to the tariff regime that the U.S. has imposed on us, because it is unsustainable. It makes the product uneconomic to sell at a 50% increase in cost.
Okay, then describe for the rest of the country, what does that do to your community?
Well, half of our community relies on the steel plant, either directly or indirectly. It's about 2,800 jobs directly, but it impacts grocery stores, restaurants, the theater, the home improvement stores. Every one of those industries, secondary industries, and the suppliers, of course, too, Algoma, that go in there and do contract work. Every one of those businesses is going to be feeling the pinch of less money in Algoma's pocket.
Well, and I was going to ask you about the speed of that, because as you described it, hobbling along at 25% tariffs, you double that to 50. How long can you sustain those jobs? How long can any company sustain that kind of a tariff increase?
I mean, Algoma will know the answer with certainty. They're going through, as I understand, a number of scenarios to determine what path they will have to go down. A lot of it depends on what the supports are going to be from the federal government. So they've announced that defense spending will be made with Canadian steel, that Canadian projects will be made with Canadian steel. But if it takes 6 months to get there, there might not be.
There you go. I mean, got cut off there, but it's pretty bad for the aluminum and steel industry at 50% tariff. And then they're talking about all the spin off the businesses around there, and that's usually what happens. All the supporting industries are affected as well. And that is devastating for, I mean, we're a big exporter of aluminum and steel.
Yeah, but America is also a big importer, and they can't immediately replace what's lost. So it's like a lose-lose. It's a very odd situation, unless Trump is thinking about like the next 20 years or something like that. But I just can't see future administrations continuing with this kind of self-sabotage, really, because this is all just about Quebec hydropower, basically, isn't it? Because that's quite a cheap form of energy and very reliable. So they need to do something with it. One of the things that they do with it is produce steel and aluminium. So, I mean, where's Trump going to get? You can't just click your fingers and create masses of hydropower, you know? It's a very peculiar decision. But, you know, if Danielle Smith is right and there's something about to happen, maybe there's a deal on the table and it'll make this make sense.
Well, it's not too far away. The G7 is what, less than like 2 weeks away, so.
10 days, yeah.
So, and then we talked about this yesterday, a Sam Cooper story, but now it's getting picked up by other outlets as well. A new report reveals that Mexican cartel activity in Canada is growing, moving online, and even using Canada Post to traffic drugs. Well, there you go. There's a use for Canada Post. Well, how are they going to move their drugs now if Canada Post goes on strike?
Yeah, God knows what they're going to do. I don't know if DHL would offer the same rates, would they?
I mean, that has been talked about a while ago by Kash Patel of the FBI, that the Mexican cartels were moving north to infiltrate the northern border, because the southern one, they say it's sealed, according to many of them. I mean, there is a dramatic drop-off in crossings in the U.S. south border. And this is here from the Fraser Institute. The average Canadian family will pay about close to $70,000 income in taxes this year. And you look at this, this is the tax burden. Income taxes, $23,000, payroll, health taxes, $16,000, sales taxes, property taxes, profit taxes, sin taxes, fuel and carbon taxes, other taxes. You know, like if you buy a property in British Columbia, you're going to have property transfer tax. If you buy a new property, you know what I mean? If you buy a new property and it's your second home, you're going to have GST on that property plus the property transfer tax. There's an employer health tax for businesses, and that adds to the wages. You know, when they provide raises, it's part of the whole compensation package. There's just tax after tax of tax. If you buy a used vehicle in British Columbia, it starts at 12% and it escalates based on the price of the vehicle. Taxes, 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 and it's causing some people to make choices. And Alberta is definitely, there's no sales tax, which is a huge difference, right? Like that 7%, and same for you were in Ontario there, right? Like no break there. You got the HST there, so 12% taxes on used vehicles. These are the things that, like, if you think about it, the used taxes on used vehicles is just ludicrous. Like that vehicle can generate so much tax revenue, whereas in Alberta there's zero taxes on that used vehicle. And like people are trying to get by, you know, like people buying used vehicles aren't, you know, typically the wealthy, and so they try to buy a used vehicle and they can't because the taxes are just ridiculous. And there you go.
It's not cool. But this Fraser Institute thing, we should point out, they've put this out there because they're highlighting that June 8th, so 3 days from now, that's the day on which the average household will start earning money just for themselves, rather than to pay in tax.
So you worked the first 5 months basically for the government, because this is based on a family income of $158,000. So two people making about $75,000 each, like on average, right? So, which isn't much these days. You know what I mean? Like, I know that, like, I know lots of people that, you know, like if they're making, you know, even nurses and stuff like that are making in there, and they say there's nothing left, you know, especially when they're paying rent and the car payment and just tax, right? Just tax.
And then inflation, which is, many argue, another form of tax, which it is really.
Well, that's the biggest form of tax, is like, you know, the inflation that eats your buying power, right? So there you go. And I guess they're getting ready. Somebody, Kananaskis getting ready for the big G7. They're getting the golf courses ready, and Donald Trump going to probably win the tournament out there. He's quite the golfer.
Well, they don't know if he's going to arrive yet, but this is a golf course that Jean Chrétien and Tony Blair, George Bush, someone else was mentioned. They've all been there apparently over the years, and so they're thinking maybe Trumpy's going to turn up.
Do you think he'll play a game of bingo, bango, bongo with them? I've never seen. I don't know if Mark Carney looks like a golfer to me.
Yeah, I don't know as well. He doesn't seem to have the frame for it, does he? He doesn't seem to have the physical attributes.
And then when are they going to change the name from the G7 to like the G something, and then plus all these other people we invite, and we don't invite anyone? The G, not so much 7, but we invited Ukraine and some other countries, and not India.
Or Russia, which is obviously quite a big deal. And I don't think... Is China actually going to be there this time? Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. It's a funny one with China.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I don't think China is going to be there. So, I mean, it's kind of like... It's a bit silly, isn't it? It doesn't really represent the world's biggest economies. It's just friends, isn't it? It's basically just America and America's, you know, lieutenants.
And then we're just going to talk about this real briefly. Bill C-18, still in force. Still in force. We're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of media being crippled by Bill C-18 in Canada. Just a reminder to the Liberal government, what reason is it still in place for? Christia, if you're watching, why? Answer as to why Bill C-18 is still in place, and it endangers our community, especially in wildfire season. Wildfires burning all across Canada right now. And most people, the Liberal government even recognizes that social media, especially Meta, is so important that they've spent millions of dollars to get their message out there, but not important enough for media outlets to share their information in critical times to the communities. So you are essentially putting communities at risk because you decided that Meta is important enough to put Liberal talking points on, but not important enough to put community information on when it comes to wildfires. I don't know.
Yeah, and David Eby came out and defended it, didn't he? He was saying, oh no, but official people can still post things, even
official
though
people.
That's...
Who are these official people?
That is a terrible thing to admit to, isn't it? It's like, oh, the government basically can say things on there, but the press can't scrutinize it or correct it when they make mistakes, as they often do.
Yeah. We got a clip here to play, and this is a surveillance camera playing of that shooting in Toronto here. And if you're, if you don't like that kind of stuff, you can just close your eyes for a second.
Video newly released by Toronto police, people duck and take cover as 3 masked men burst in and opened fire at a busy pub on its opening night in March. One of the worst mass shootings the city has ever seen, injuring 12 people.
Some were shot multiple times. One person was shot 6 times and survived.
Police now say they've linked that attack to a rash of violence targeting the local tow truck industry, including this drive-by shooting 3 days earlier outside a tow yard. Watch as the victim hides behind that car. The suspects then turn around and start shooting again. The victim, struck by a bullet, falls to the ground but survives.
This disregard for human life.
There you go. You can stop it there. And we've been covering this for a bit there. this truck driver thing. There's some extortion cases and all kinds of stuff going on there. Tow truck drivers.
Yeah, it's like just gangsterism, isn't it, in a lot of cases? And that was a bit scary, wasn't it? Because the guy there doing the main bit of shooting seemed to have like an AK-47, didn't he? Some kind of something inspired by the AK-47 with the the magazine curling out. It's pretty sketchy, isn't it? But might as well ban hunting rifles while we're at it, just in case.
Yeah. We got a clip here from Elizabeth May. And to me, I mean, this is a bit of comedy, but it seems like she's a time-traveling scientist now. Like, they're going to play this clip here.
Put out most of once a fire's out of control, but you could stop it early if you could, because the nature of 21st century fire is very different from 20th century fire because of the climate crisis. It's changed fire behavior. It's made fires much harder to put out and much more dangerous for.
So according to Elizabeth May, physics have changed since, the 20th century. And I'll just point out from my own personal experience, I was working with AFS in 1980, 81, I think it was. Could be 82, 81, 82. And a lot of northern Alberta was on fire, and the fires were so hot that there was no trying to put the fire out. It was about trying to make fire breaks miles and miles and miles in front of the fires to try to put them out. And that's the same thing that goes now. Like, fires in hot temperature will burn hotter. And then hot fires can do lots of different things. And so it has nothing to do, I mean, just like, again, Elizabeth May, I mean, like, she's like Canada's comedian.
She just thinks she says things sometimes that are a little bit silly, really. And in the absence of Justin Trudeau, she's the one that we have to look to for gaffes, I think. But I think what she's trying to say is that it's drying now. I think she's trying to make a comment about drought, isn't she? And temperatures and things like that. But what a way to explain it, 20th century fire is different from 21st century fire. It just sounds like she's in like Athens in the 5th century BC, trying to put out a theory on the elements or something.
It sounds like Bill Gates.
She's a funny character.
She's Bill Gates. She's an expert in everything and an expert in nothing, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, she said she was going to vote for the throne speech, like she's relevant enough to make a difference. Like, she would love to be the hammer, wouldn't she? Oh my God.
She is close, isn't she? She's like potentially one away from being that person, but alas for her, that didn't happen.
Yeah, she's volunteered for a few things, and then you found this last that Trump's put a travel ban on 12 countries.
That's in response to the Molotov cocktail affair in Colorado, and the man that was arrested in that is Egyptian. And was in the US illegally, I believe. He'd overstayed his visa. And then Trump has connected his ban to that, but not banned Egypt. But he has banned Haiti, Sudan, Libya, Chad, Congo, Brazzaville, which is like the other Congo, not the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And then there's some other ones that have like restricted visas, like Venezuela. Obviously, as you might imagine, this has made his opponents hysterically angry, and they're very, very angry. And they're going out and they're trying to interview people from Somalia and places like that in the US, and even in Somalia, to try and get them to be like upset with Trump. So it's just the usual media circus. But I mean, it sort of makes sense, because he's basing quite a lot of this on terrorism in those countries, and then also a kind of propensity to overstay visas, because obviously certain nationalities are much more likely to overstay a visa and then disappear and become an illegal resident. So it makes sense that he would do such a thing. I mean, it's not sort of madness, but that is, of course, how the Democrats are going to try and portray it.
And we're going to move on to BC and local news. We have actually lots going on in the BC local news. Yesterday we didn't have much, but the big news is Premier David Eby says no. That's the biggest news, and the Conservative Party put this thing out. He just told the rest of the Canada he's not interested in jobs, energy security, and economic growth. despite calls from Doug Ford. And Eby actually answered to Doug Ford. He says he won't be changing his mind no matter what Doug Ford says.
And then he compared it to some bloody tunnel in Toronto.
Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah, he won't be telling Doug Ford.
Does that have anything to do with
to build tunnels.
Canada's access to the Pacific Ocean?
Yeah. And he doesn't support a And then Daniel Smith says you can't build a pipeline to the northwest coast and still have a tanker ban. You cannot have an emissions cap that is so aggressive that companies would have to shut down operations in order to achieve it. You can't have enthusiasm to export natural gas and win the AI data war and then have punitive policies against natural gas on your electricity grid. We're either going to be an energy superpower on all fronts or we're not. I mean, that seems like common sense.
But this, for some reason, this kind of point just doesn't seem to enter David Eby's mind, or people like David Eby and people in the Bloc and the Green Party and other kind of opponents to building out Canada's energy infrastructure. It doesn't seem to enter their minds, even though they are well aware that artificial intelligence and your ability to harness that will basically determine the future of our species. And that includes geopolitics, that includes wealth, health, everything, food production. But for some reason, so they know that, they've been told that. Of course, they know how powerful and important AI is. But then for some reason, they can't link that, even though there's a very clear link, they can't link that to the requirement for a superabundance of energy. So somehow that it just doesn't work. The cogs just don't touch in the brain. And then they start talking about wind turbines as if that's going to be able to power AI data centers.
We've got a story coming up later with Adrian Dix, the energy minister here, that'll make it even more absurd. But we'll get to that. But we're going to play this clip here on David Eby's trade mission here.
Partnerships as compared to before. Just a few hours ago, the Premier provided an update to the media back here in BC. He says he feels Japanese officials seem to be much more engaged and interested in building new partnerships as compared to before. A big focus today was energy and critical minerals. Eby met with multiple companies who have investments with BC companies, as well as a government-owned bank with money invested in LNG Canada, saying the project has a significance in Japan. Eby says the trade barriers being put up by the U.S. appear to have made officials over there more eager to partner with BC.
I'm seeing a real increased energy and desire of Japanese companies to partner in British Columbia. We're having higher level meetings with the companies, with senior executives. They have a better knowledge of what's happening in the province, and they also have taken on significant interests in BC projects that weren't present there in the same way last time we were here.
Just days before the trip, BC passed two controversial bills aimed at fast-tracking energy and infrastructure projects, sparking anger among some Indigenous communities, with one prominent leader backing out of the trip. But Eby says it hasn't been a point of concern for Japanese officials, who he says have expressed their desire to work with Indigenous leaders. Eby was also asked about Alberta Premier Daniel Smith's proposal for a pipeline to BC's north coast. He says something like that is years away, saying his government is focused on driving shovel-ready projects forward and that he does not support lifting the tanker ban.
There you go. And in an MLA, Harman Bangu, conservative David Eby went to Japan to pitch BC, but the world is done with woke policies that kill certainty. Japanese companies won't invest. I'm sure it won't just be Japan. The world doesn't trust Eby and his track record. Working class families pay the price while the NDP keeps pushing instability, ideology, and anti-growth policies. And there you go. Well, you know what? We need to see actual deals. We need to see some deals. Like talking, it's kind of like those forms that are being filled out. That isn't a deal. You know, saying people are, want to have a deal is different than actually getting a deal.
And to get a deal needs change, obviously, because there's a reason that money hasn't really been coming into BC during the NDP's reign. But that's the thing. I mean, people around the world really do seem, and in Canada, really do seem to be bearish on BC. They don't have faith in a lot of the the legal regime in British Columbia, vis-a-vis, if I may use a pretentious term, the First Nations. That's the particular thing. questions about the First Nations, because the NDP is so deferent to the First Nations, and to almost to the point of making it's created almost like a new governance system in British Columbia, and that's not something that international capital is interested in having to worry about. Not for a minute. They don't want to. They don't want that kind of mystery. They want to know who they're dealing with, and they want to know who calls the shots. So, I mean, it is kind of it's a slowly unfolding catastrophe, isn't it, with the BC economy?
Yeah, and then people are starting to vote with their feet. We've got this chart here that was from the BC Chamber. One of the local politicians sent to me when he went to the Chamber presentation there, the BC Chamber of Commerce. And you can see there that the net migration out of British Columbia has returned. And there's been a few times that we've seen net migration out of British Columbia. And I was part of the 1981, 82, like, the 1979, 82 thing. I was part of the net migration when I went to Alberta because I couldn't find a job in British Columbia. When I was a youngster, 19 years old, I left British Columbia and went to Northern Alberta for a job. And there you go. And right now, you were seeing people, and they're starting to play in their pickup trucks, Alberta bound. We've done several stories on it too. We've interviewed the person from U-Haul and saying that there's a lot of trucks going to Alberta and coming back empty. So,
very sad. And it really is a political thing, isn't it? Because BC has all the ingredients necessary to be the richest part of Canada. It could be done. It could easily be done. Well, maybe not easily, but it could certainly be done. So this comes down to decisions.
Yeah, we're going to shift a little bit of focus here to the Okanagan Lake here, and just a PSA, a public service announcement here. 2 drownings in 3 days in Okanagan Lake. Just, really be careful, and, make sure you're not under the influence of alcohol or drugs when you're swimming. And, you're near shoreline and you're swimming with somebody. And, just be careful out there. That's 2 bodies in 3 days in Okanagan Lake. And we had a small wildfire just south of Okanagan Falls that's now being held, quickly actioned and put out. So that must be a 20th century fire because it was put out quickly.
Old-fashioned fire.
Christina Lowen, a local, the MLA for the Kelowna Centre riding, put an opinion piece on Kelowna Now. And she said the warning signs, we've talked about this, and this is a story that's not going away. We've talked about this quite a bit. Warning signs, KGH, were ignored for years, and she's outraged. It's about time Christina Lowen spoke up. We don't hear much from her, and we've asked her for several interviews, and we're asking again, Christina. I'd love for you to come in and have a chat with us. But
well, I think I have asked, and I think they're looking at a possibility. So maybe we can have a chat with her.
There you go.
That's a good. She's good. She's actually a good writer, if I may say so. I think so. Anyway, it's actually worth reading her little columns, and that's not true of. That's certainly not true of all politicians, but it's true with her, I think.
And this next story, a British Columbia story here. This one gives me puzzle. It makes you want to just like. So BC, this is Adrian Dix is our energy minister. BC Hydro seeks baseload power to boost from stable sources because of the drought. That goes on so that means less hydropower because we're a net buyer of power now. So BC Hydro is requesting expressions of interest from companies to provide, different types of energy, geothermal, hydroelectric projects to expand long-term power capacity because they're saying that, getting power from solar and wind isn't reliable enough. But, there's also nuclear, which BC won't allow, right? And they were turned down when they tried to get that LNG plant here in the Okanagan here so that they could get some extra power. Oil and gas, no. Coal, no. And we sell a lot of coal from, the Elkford Fernie area with Fording Coal. I think it was, I don't know if it's still Fording Coal, but still a coal mine there. So they only want, I know with geothermal, there's been some questions raised with geothermal here, even locally, that geothermal open systems actually can raise the temperature of the water and then cause organisms to grow underground. And and people pumping water for that, for well water, can cause organisms to grow in there, which is not good for the population. So I'm just, like, they're running out of options is kind of like the point.
Times like this, it's when it becomes clear that we're not dealing with rational people anymore. And I think with a lot of people who are who've completely been absorbed into the climate change sort of movement, or whatever you want to call it, I think they've gone beyond the point of rationality now. And it's like we were saying, I think yesterday, they don't even want to say the word oil or gas, because to them that's a taboo. That's a taboo in the same way that, like, tribes in the Amazon have a taboo about a certain, like, tree or something. It's like, oh, don't go next to that tree. That's the scary tree. It's got a ghost that lives in it or something. That's the kind of mindset that we're dealing with now. And it's I mean, it's actually, like, really pitiable, isn't it? This is like a subsect of a religion that's just gone wrong. It's just gone off the deep end, and it has no relationship to reality anymore. The way that they are so they're so aggressive against and so hostile to natural gas. That to me, I think, was the clue. That's when I started to realize that they'd kind of lost their minds, because natural gas is responsible for most declines in carbon emissions over the last 20 years or something like that. I think it's 20 years, maybe even 30 years. It's all down to gas. But for some reason, gas is the enemy. I mean, I just don't. I don't get it.
This is an important story. BC Hydro. This is their second request seeking partners, because they did make that request to do. I think it was either them or Fortis did that thing for the LNG stuff going on here in the Okanagan. They were turned down. They said the BC government said no. So they've launched that second request, who can deliver market-ready technologies for boosting power conservation in homes across the province. And then here's one of Dick's ideas. Dick said BC Hydro may explore part of the request several types of projects, including pump storage, hydro power generation, a system where the water is pumped to an elevated reservoir. So this sounds like the oil thing with the where you have to decarbonize oil. So you're going to use energy to pump the water back into the dam to run it again. Do you know what I mean? So most of the time, physics say you do that, you lose energy, right? Because it takes more energy. Otherwise, you would have an endless loop. You would do that all the time, wouldn't you? Do you know what I mean? Because
I've heard this talked about.
That's the holy
I've heard
grail.
This discussed as.
That's the holy grail of energy.
I've heard this discussed in very excited terms by people who talk about using wind or solar. So when that's in excess, use that to sort of pump the water on a dam, and then it's almost like a battery. It's like you've made a battery for yourself. But it is right to say that ultimately there's so much wastage there, isn't there? There's so much energy being put into something, whereas instead of just having the wind turbines and the solar panels, you could just have a nuclear power plant or something like that, and then you wouldn't have to go through this farce.
This is the problem with hydrogen right now. They say, because hydrogen is basically a battery as well. But there's so much loss of energy. So you take energy, it takes more energy to create the hydrogen than you get out of the energy. Otherwise, it's the holy grail. If you could find a way that you would take less energy to make more energy, that's the holy grail, right?
But it's almost like, I mean, it is quite frightening if you look at it from in a macro sense. It's almost like when you hear about Easter Island, how their civilization was dying, but they devoted loads of their energy and time to erecting the big heads, the big statues. It's almost like that. It's like we're facing enormous crises, and we're looking at things like this. I mean, rather than the obvious, there's something staring us right in the face, like gas in this case.
It's right under your feet. It's right under your feet. Right there under your feet.
Well, BC has an abundance of gas. I mean, and gas, I just can't believe they've made gas. I still can't get that into my soul, that they've made natural gas into like this brutal, savage enemy of the climate.
So perhaps
it's just nonsense. It's the best thing that's happened to the planet in a long time, is because it got us off coal.
Yeah. Energy is everything. Energy is in everything we do. So perhaps the politicians that are against energy should go without energy and see how they feel, and see how virtuous they feel at the end of it, because they're impoverishing this province and the nation. with these silly ideas of saying, like these endless loops. And, solar is a solution for many ways, but it takes a lot of batteries as well. And they don't like, Tesla has some solutions there with battery storage and solar, because that is a workable solution. But they don't like Tesla either, so much for that. We're going to talk about that later. So many political choices, right? So many reasons not to do things that are based on politics, not on common sense. The BC SPCA seized about 34 Bengal cats from an irresponsible breeder in the Okanagan. And I put this in here because it's such a sad story. The poor little kitties. And we got some pictures of some of the other ones that look a little distressed, right? So there you go.
So I guess that's people that just wanted to make a lot of money and then got in over their heads, didn't know what to do. And
you can go to KelownaNow.com and read about the cats and a lot more on Kelowna Now. We update that all the time, KelownaNow.com.